We're talking about categorical data today, and we're going to learn how to graph it. So remember, categorical data is data that can be put into groups. So it's different than quantitative data. Quantitative data are numbers, and you can average them, find the mean, which is the average, all of those kinds of things. Categorical data you can't do that, but we just basically put it into groups, or categories. See where that word came from? So we have these categories, and we need to figure out a way to display them. Now, there's going to be lots of different options that you can use, but the four main ones I have here on the inside of your foldable. We either do a bar graph, a pie chart, a frequency table, or a dot plot. We are going to probably do some segmented bar graphs, some double bar graphs, some two-way frequency tables, so some versions of these we may also, but these are our main options for how to display our categorical data. And the reason why we need to know how to do this stuff is because the main rule of statistics is make a picture. Make a picture, make a picture, make a picture. That's what we have to do, right? And if we don't make a picture, people don't really understand the data that we've collected. It's just a bunch of gibberish then. So how do we do that? First of all, we have a bar graph. You guys have seen these before. In quantitative data, you're going to see something called a histogram. Histograms look very similar to bar graphs, but they're not the same thing. So a bar graph, the way you can tell that this is a bar graph and not a histogram is it has this gap in between the bars. See, every single bar has a gap because it's showing categories. It's showing categorical data. Whereas a histogram shows like a range, like how much do you weigh? And someone can weigh, 127.5, 127.6 pounds, right? There's ranges. With categories, they don't touch because they're totally different, right? These aren't numbers that are next to each other. So we can do the bar graph like this. So this is some data I actually collected from a survey of students, just like the survey we did, and this was their birth month. And you'll notice that when I put it into the program that I used, it didn't actually do it January, February, March, April, May. So I probably should have paid attention to that and moved them around in some way. But this is a bar graph, and bar graphs are really great because you can see the frequency of each one. So basically, you just need to make sure when you make a bar graph that you've labeled both of your axes. The categories go down here, and then the frequency of how many times you saw someone in that category goes up here. So frequency means like how many people have a January birthday, how many people have an October birthday. You can see sometimes a horizontal bar graph. We see those a lot in the news. So sometimes you'll have the categories up here and then the frequency this way. The next option is a pie chart, and you guys have all seen pie charts. We see them a lot in the news as well. Pie charts are just going to be when you have very few categories. You really don't want to use a pie chart with tons of categories because it's hard to tell a lot of information. If you had 20 or 30 categories, pie charts just don't make sense at that point because it's really hard to compare. Whereas a bar graph is a lot easier to compare. You can see very clearly which one is the tallest and which one's not the tallest. And here we can see which one is the biggest, but then we can't really tell, is this one bigger than that one? Or are they equal? Like, we really can't tell that kind of stuff. So you should only use pie charts for things that it's like a few categories. A lot of times pie charts should be labeled, so you should have percentages in here if you want to be very precise. So pie charts are always used to show a percent of the whole sample. So all of the percentages in a pie chart should always add up to 100%. So that means that these categories can't overlap at all, right? So I couldn't use something like, what's your favorite food? And you get to pick two. And so I pick, steak and fruit. And then in the pie chart, I would be included in both of those, right? So more than 100% of people, if you added it all up, it would be more than 100%. So that's what we want to avoid. Pie charts should only add up to 100%. And so what you can do to figure out how big of a slice you need to make is you can go back to, pre-calculus and remember how to find that the that the angle of this is 360 degrees. So you can figure out like, oh, well, if it's 25% of that, then what's 25% of 360? You can use a protractor if you're creating these by hand. So that's pie chart. Next, we have a frequency table. You're going to see these a lot. Now, frequency tables aren't great representations for visual things. They're just really not great if you're trying to like give a nice visual, but frequency tables you see all the time, okay? They will tell you basically just the count. So here's, all of this is the same information. So here's the birth month, of a student and how many times I saw that. So that's the frequency, that's the count. Now the relative frequency tells me what percent of the whole group answered October, what percent of the whole group answered June. So this is a great thing to have if you're trying to create another chart. So maybe you're trying to create a pie chart. You need to find the relative frequency, and relative frequency just means what percent of the whole group is this. You can see I have 24 kids, and so if 6 of them have a January birthday, that is 25% of them had a January birthday. And we will see two-way frequency tables tomorrow that can compare two different things. And those you'll see a lot on the ACT and on lots of standardized tests. They love frequency tables. Finally, we have a dot plot. Let me see if I can get that so I'm not right in front of it, but I'm not sure if I can. All right, so here's a dot plot. This one is very much like a bar chart, except for instead of bars, it just has a dot for each person that counts. So, we have 6 dots in January. This one is another great way to display categorical data. The interesting thing about a dot plot is this one can also display quantitative data. So we're going to use it to display quantitative data later as well. But you can definitely use this for categorical data. You just put a dot by each person. But you'll notice that the way that I created this one, all of the titles overlapped. So when you're creating these, you have to be careful on that. So there you go. That's our 4 options for creating a graph of some sort to show our categorical data.